Reagan, Powell was national security advisor during all of what was going on in El Salvador and Nicaragua. And I know he's very close to and involved in the process of arming the government of El Salvador against the rebels there. And I don't know. I'm sure he was involved in Iran-Contra to one degree or another, but I don't remember anymore his role in that. But remember, they called it Iran-Contra because it wasn't just arming the Contras. It was selling missiles to the Ayatollah. Same time they're arming Saddam Hussein's war against him. They're having the Israelis sell the Iranians missiles in order to try to get hostages freed from Lebanon, which never even really worked anyway. But so I'm not exactly sure his role in that, but he was national security advisor at the time. And if he wasn't advising if he didn't know everything about it and wasn't advising the president against it, he wasn't doing his job. So that's at the absolute minimum on that. But I know he was involved in backing the death squads in El Salvador. And then, like I say, the invasion of Panama in 1989, they killed something like 10,000 people. I don't know if there was ever a legitimate count. And that was absolutely unnecessary. I mean, Manuel Noriega was George Bush's guy. He'd been CIA, a CIA paid asset for 30 years or something by that time. And had been involved in Iran-Contra with them and fighting in Nicaragua and all of that. And so, the idea that they couldn't find a way to take care of whatever the problem was with him, whatever, never mind any legitimate threat to the American people. Obviously, that's ridiculous. But whatever threat he was to the Americans' plans, the idea that they couldn't find a way to negotiate a solution and could only launch a war in the middle of the night without any congressional approval whatsoever and launch a regime change like that. And Powell was, of course, a huge part of that. I mean, that was, he was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time. And of course, was right in the top of all the decision making on the inside of the council with H.W. Bush and Brent Scowcroft and James Baker and all them when they launched that war. And then that was what really set the stage for Iraq was, man, Panama was great. And without having to worry about what the Soviets are going to do, as Cold War's ending here, we could do whatever we want. Like, look how easy that was. We could do that again. Remember how we just picked up the phone and coordinated it and got it done? Let's do that again. And that was kind of the way, was the basis of their thinking and going into Iraq War I. So now I'm sorry I'm rambling. I'll let you say something before I go into Iraq War I here.
No,
I can tell you're trying to get in there.
Yeah, no, this is perfect time because I wanted to talk to you about like the Powell Doctrine and everything like that specifically. In that, I guess for me, I only really remember him as the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State. Like, that's it. And I think most people like my age and a lot of like the viewers of this show are even younger than me only remember him as just like the guy who lied about the Iraq War. But he was important enough that in 1993, Justin Raimondo wrote a book about him. Right. So like what happened in the Iraq War and like the Powell Doctrine. And I guess one of the reasons why he was so important as Secretary of State was that he was kind of seen as being a successful military leader after like the disasters of Vietnam.
Well, listen, I mean, they wanted to run him for president in 96. Some people did. And the story was that his wife talked him out of it, that she was just too fearful that he would be assassinated for being the first black president. And he just owed it to her. Then if she didn't want to do it, then he would not do it. But the Republican establishment for a time, I think, wanted to run him. But then they decided, no, that'd be all right. They'll get a Bush son in there in 2000. And that'll be good enough. They can have their war then. But yeah, I mean, he did. He had this huge career. He wrote this massive best-selling memoir in the 1990s. He's, considered to be one of the most popular public figures, and like, they have there's Hollywood, and then there's Nerd Hollywood on the East Coast. He was like the biggest of big shots among those guys. And he was a great TV performer during Iraq War I. He and General Scowcroft would get up there and point at the maps and point at the, TV screens where they're showing you the 1 or 2% of bombs that were laser guided bombs. And, rather than just dumb bombs, which was the vast majority of what they used in Iraq War I, emptying those old inventories. But, he became very famous. Iraq War I know you're too young, but Iraq War I, man, it was a show. You know, like George Carlin says, man, it was the first war that was on every channel plus cable. Like, it was an extravaganza, Kyle. It was, and you know, 2002 and the lead up to Iraq War II was a bit like this too. But like, man, they put new country music songs on the radio. There's yellow ribbons tied around every cylinder, tree or pole, anywhere in America outside where there's something round and tall. It's got a yellow ribbon tied around it, or else, how come you spit on the soldiers, boy? And just the level of hype around that thing is just incredible. So it made real stars out of. In fact, there was a guy, I can't remember his name now. One of the anchors on CNN was like a handsome guy, and so he got like movie star level famous. That, and all the ladies loved him, and you know, all of this stuff. Like, that was how it was. It was completely bananas, dude. So he got made into a huge media star through being the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during Iraq War I. And you know, it should be mentioned that, and I wish I'd had a chance to bring this up in the debate with Bill Kristol, Kyle, that if you read the declaration of war against Saddam Hussein in the Weekly Standard in 1997, it's written by Paul Wolfowitz and Zalmay Khalilzad, and it's called Overthrow Him. And the first line is, you know, if he just stopped at the northern oil fields, he probably would have gotten away with it. And, you know, Wolfowitz was Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy at the time. So, and Khalilzad worked for him. So that ain't blowing smoke. That's, again, you know, the 10th source from inside the H.W. Bush government who said that, yeah, no, he essentially had permission to invade the northern oil fields. He just took it too far, went all the way to Kuwait City and the coast, and then got in trouble with Margaret Thatcher, and then H.W. Bush got in trouble with Margaret Thatcher, and then we had a war. It was essentially how that happened. Anyway, it just goes to show that was just absolutely an unnecessary war. It just absolutely did not have to be that way. And as I demonstrate in the latest book, mostly block quoting Noam Chomsky, but I've tracked down a lot of his sources myself and show he's exactly right, that all through the second half of 1990, from August through January, man, Hussein was just trying to save a little bit of face on the way out. I'll leave Kuwait. Just let me keep these two little islands. It's Bubiyan, and I forgot the other one, his name. These two little uninhabited islands. He wanted to have an oil transfer facility there. And that was fine. They could have done that. And now any token face-saving thing. In fact, by the end, Kyle, Saddam was offering, I'm sorry I'm taking too long on this. By the end of the thing, by like January, when the war is imminent, Hussein is saying, look, forget Bubiyan and whatever the other one, the islands. Forget any of that. All I want is a promise that American troops will withdraw from the region and that Israel will withdraw from the Palestinian territories. But no time limit, no structure, no roadmap, no plan, no nothing, no teeth, no nothing. All I want is tissue paper face saving here. That you promise that if I do leave, that everything will be fine one day. Whatever, dude. Sure, Saddam. That's all they had to say. Sure, Saddam. Israel will get out of the West Bank someday. And that would have been enough, you know? And they wouldn't do it. They wanted that war so damn bad. It was, God, I'm telling you, man. That's why I always hit on this refrain, because I think it's the most important point of all, right? Is that it didn't have to be this way. You know, there's, I guess the phrase is like the page of history turning, or the winds of time blowing, or something, where certainly when you learn history in fourth grade, you know, if they teach you anything about the world you're living in elementary school anymore, they teach you essentially that everything did have to be this way. That, of course, FDR had to do the New Deal. And, of course, whatever, the world wars. Of course, everything. Of course, Truman had to use the nukes or he wouldn't have used them. Of course, underlines all of it. It's a democracy. And that means the people choose the very best of us to make the best decisions that they can at the time that reflect the will of the people. And you're telling me the majority of most people are bad and wrong? That couldn't be right. So then everything that happened is how it was supposed to happen. But then get a little bit older and you go, no. Actually, if Brent Scowcroft had just taken a left instead of a right, nothing like this would have happened at all. None of this would have happened at all. Because everything that we talk about when we talk about the war on terrorism is the aftermath of Iraq War I, which, of course, itself was the aftermath of the Iran-Iraq War. That, of course, Colin Powell was involved, at least in helping arm the Iraqis. I don't know if he was directly involved in the arming the Iranians part. I guess he probably must have been. So then, after Iraq War I, they kept the sanctions. And H.W. Bush said repeatedly, and this was the consensus of the military and the White House, that we're going to keep these sanctions until Saddam Hussein is removed from power. And the bet was, it's sort of like they used to say this about North Korea all the time. He'll collapse any day now. Oh, he's teetering on the edge. Oh, they're on the brink of collapse. Like Assad. Yeah, we can back Al-Qaeda a little bit because Assad is going to fall before Al-Qaeda grows too big. Don't worry, Kyle. We game this out. We know it's, they think that. And then, but of course, what happened was they impoverished the people of Iraq. And relative to Saddam Hussein, they were weaker and weaker. It's not like he was, making a killing. But even as they said at the time, it was the cliche, oh, he takes the oil for food program money and he's spending it all on his palaces. Like, who knows if that's even true at all? It probably just meant he was beefing up security at him or something, getting a little repainting done. But anyway, he sure wasn't, doing everything he could to provide for the people of Iraq, particularly factions that were his enemies inside the country and whatever. So they knew that. Like, that was their argument against him. See what a bad guy that he is? He just spends it all in his palaces. I was like, yeah, but you guys are admitting that whatever money you're letting get in there is not getting to the people. So maybe we need to find a better way to proceed. And then the answer was, no, we're just going to keep it like this. And I think Madeleine Albright, I guarantee you, dude, if you could find it in the record somewhere, I bet you could find Madeleine Albright saying, well, my predecessor, Colin Powell, thought that this was great. I guess Warren Christopher was before her. But, this is, if Colin Powell and Warren Christopher think this is the great policy, then this is the great policy. And she, in fact, announced that in 1997, and I document all this in Fool's Errand, I think it's in both, Rolf Ekius of the United Nations Inspectors was going to declare in an official statement and report that Iraq was weapons of mass destruction free, certified. And they knew that since the end of 1995. They were 100% certain that all the weapons had been destroyed at the end of 1991. That's just the facts. And right when he was about to do that, instead, Madeleine Albright gave a speech. And at one point, I had found the speech. I think I have the URL for the speech, at least, probably would work at the Wayback Machine, if nothing else now, of the video of her giving this speech in 1997 and declaring that Iraq is, Saddam Hussein is irredeemable. He cannot ever be brought in from the cold. He's as bad as Hitler or whatever it is. And so we're going to keep the sanctions regime on until Saddam Hussein is removed from power. And then the Clinton people, they passed the Iraq Regime Change Act. What was it called? The Iraq Liberation Act of 1998 at the insistence of the Project for a New American Century types. But Clinton didn't have the political capital or the will to invade the country and get it done. So essentially, it was just a ticking bomb. And you could quote Ron Paul from back then. Ron Paul goes, this is a ticking time bomb, man. This thing is going on. We're declaring it's our official policy to seek regime change in Iraq. That means a war. This is a virtual declaration of war. Those are his exact words in 1998. So we should not be doing this. And God, ain't nobody listened to him but me.